Welcome to the Underground, my little underground with Peter A.
It's My Little Underground. I'm Peter A, and returning to the show once again, we have Joe Trainor from the LA band Dummy. Their second album, Free Energy, just got announced. It'll be coming out to September the 6th, and their first single, Nullspace, is out right now. Go check that out because it's outstanding. And Joe and I talked about the new creative direction for Dummy, Joe's PR work and his love for helping new artists, his big tour on the West Coast and in Europe this fall, and so much more with Joe Trainor of Dummy right here on My Little Underground.
My Little Underground.
All right, Joe Trainor, congrats on the album announcement, LP2 for Dummy, Free Energy, September 6th. How you feeling?
Good. Excited, stressed out, nervous. I don't know. All the things that you would assume someone would feel for putting out their second record.
Yeah. I know for the past year, following you guys on social media, you're giving little teases and hints for LP2. I remember, what was it? Maybe last summer or fall or something. You were saying LP2 end of 2024, and I got kind of sad. I'm like, I gotta wait to the end of next year for more Dummy, but it's fine. We're here. We're here.
Yeah,
That's great.
we're finally here.
Yeah. So tell me all about the release show you got going on and the subsequent tour following. I know you're hitting up the West Coast as usual, and
Yeah.
you're going back to Europe. So let's start with the release show. Tell me all about that.
Yeah, the release show September 7th. We wanted to just do something a little different from our previous one, and we just wanted to make the show really weird and interesting. The opening band, Lock Slip, is kind of like a chaotic hardcore band, kind of like Converge, Dillinger Escape Plan sounding band.
Wow.
And the second band, Blimp, is kind of like one of my favorite current LA bands. They're very new. They're young and they play kind of like just weird Sonic Youth noise rock with a little bit of like pop thrown in there. They're just really, really good live. And then we have another artist we haven't announced yet. And then yeah, it's at Lodge Room and it's a way bigger spot than we normally play here. We're kind of just throwing it all against the wall. To see, hopefully it does well. And yeah, the West Coast tour, we're stoked for playing with a bunch of really good bands, doing some shows with that band, Earl Ricka Spacek. And then just, we Curia the rest of them. And then Europe, obviously, all of us are really, really hyped to go back because the first tour we did there was incredible. So, and we're playing with a bunch of really cool bands over there too. We're gonna be doing some shows with Three Quarter Skies, which is Simon Scott of Slowdive's like band. It's
Wow.
like a band. The record was mixed by the dude from Flying Saucer Attack, which is really cool. And then we're playing with like Freak Heat Waves over there, which I'm really excited about. And we're playing with that band Wishy. And then a bunch of like other, local EU bands.
So you mentioned about the release show, the venue space is bigger.
Yeah.
Um, are most of the venues, at least on this subsequent tour that you're going on, are the venues getting bigger? Are you noticing that?
Uh, no, it's just for the LA show. We're kind of like seeing, what happens, just kind of, I guess, taking a chance and hopefully it works out. But yeah, the rest of the shows are, I think, just more of, you know, it's the first tour on the new record, so we didn't want to shoot higher than we thought was realistic.
Yeah, and that's kind of been a problem for a lot of major touring acts now. They kind of
Yeah, they
yeah,
overshoot. Yeah,
yeah.
and I obviously that comes down to just money they're being offered in these places, and that's how it happens. But we want to we don't have any uh delusions of grandeur. We make niche pop music, so I don't know. Maybe the record will do great and those shows will really be crazy but it's hard to say. We just kind of go with what we think is smart.
When it comes to Europe specifically, what is something that you and the band are trying to do differently over there, or even on the West Coast? Because maybe on the West Coast you're getting all the people that know you, or are you noticing that this time around, well, at least the shows you've been playing recently, or maybe you anticipate people that probably have discovered you some way of somehow, some way from the void this time around.
I'm not sure,
Yeah.
because it hasn't happened yet. I'm just not sure how it's gonna go down with Europe. I think going out to shows and stuff like that is more, I think, more of like a cultural thing in a different way than it is here. It's more about the music and going to see the music, and they're really excited about American bands coming over there, and likewise when European or UK bands or Australian bands or whoever come over here, there's an extra added kind of excitement because it's a band not from the country. So over the last tour we did in Europe was insanely great. Like it was just unbelievably, like it was mind blowing how awesome it was. And they just treat bands better there in terms of like hospitality and food and like just gratitude. Everyone's there to like participate in a night of like music. They're not, it's not, it doesn't feel as like connected to like drinking and social, stuff. It's definitely there to appreciate art.
Yeah, I think the Janines from New York City, they told me the same thing. They did the
Yeah.
Madrid Pop Festival, and they're like they treat bands like so much better over there, which is kind of awesome to hear. Yeah. So, diving into the new album with Free Energy, thank you for sharing with me. Listening to songs like Moon Hop and the first single, Nullspace, the first thing I thought about, it kind of sort of brought me back to EP2, where you guys were getting a little bit ambient, and this time it's a lot more groovy. Yeah, feeling like it's sort of danceable. But outside of that, it kind of reminded me of listening to Lush's Sweetness and Light and how groovy that is, and the B side of My Bloody Valentine's MBV album, how weird and out there it was. So with this album going into it like creatively, were there a lot of different ideas thrown around, or were you trying to go for something different, or just expanded upon certain ideas from previous works?
This record was extremely difficult to write. Um, when we finished the last bit of touring for Mandatory Enjoyment, we took like a 3 month break from just doing any sort of band practice, show, everything. We just took a big break to kind of just recalibrate, just try to fill up that tank again. And during that, I ended up demoing out almost a whole album's worth of stuff. And it was treading just kind of the similar territory that was Mandatory, which is very much like, krautrocky, noi, cluster kind of sounding stuff. And, no one was really feeling it because we kind of like had already done that. We had felt like, you know, we had already we all felt like we had already kind of done the best versions of that sort of sound. Like with the Sub Pop 7 inch, we felt like the A side Mono Retriever was like kind of like the most idealized best version of like that motoric pop kind of sound, and then the B side was more what we thought the future would be, like Pepsi Vacuum, which is more influenced by dance music and electronic music and chill out and IDM and trip hop and stuff like that. And yeah, like when I was writing stuff initially, it just wasn't, coming together. It just didn't feel exciting. And it took a really, really long time for us to find stuff that was exciting. And it was just changing little things here and there in terms of like how we were doing things, not being so like this song is just going to be like, one chord, or this song, and just with the two songs you mentioned, they definitely have more sound design and ambientness in them, but none of that is like analog synths. We pretty much got rid of any usage of analog synths on the whole record. There's none. We didn't want to repeat that. We didn't on the record. We really tried not to repeat doing kind of like the krautrock beat. We wanted everything to be very danceable, very body forward, and it took a really, yeah, just a really long time for that to kind of like crystallize with us. And I think it took just hearing, a few key kind of records that kind of like shifted where we wanted to go with the band in terms of for this record. And I think with this record, we barely scratched the surface of like what, the future holds in terms of like whatever we do next. I think it will be more along the lines of those two songs you mentioned, more like electronic influenced while still doing everything with guitars. It's all guitars and like weird, sampling stuff. We got more into like sampling and shit like that for this as well.
Yeah. When it comes to you mentioned no analog synths, like what is the replacement for that?
Guitars. I think this record is way more guitar-y. It might not seem that way because it isn't it isn't so obvious what is a guitar and what isn't a guitar on the record. And there's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily guess is a guitar, but it is. Did a lot of sampling of like feedback and like loops and like just, building those kind of things out kind of as textures, opposed to like in the past we would have, maybe put, an ambient drone from a synth or like, kind of doing the like, the like doo, 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 like bubbly sounds and stuff like that. Like the sounds on Nullspace, it's the bubbly sounds are from a drum machine that Alex programmed and manipulated the sounds of the drums on the thing that give it that kind of bubble sound.
Here comes a classic My Bloody Valentine comparison to Dummy, but the beauty, why I love that music so much is because I have no idea what is going on with Kevin Shields and all the instrumentation and all that stuff. I don't know what is what. It's
Yeah.
really confusing in the best way. And I feel the same way listening to Dummy. I don't
Yeah.
know what's what sometimes, and that's fine. Because
Yeah.
I was talking to Water from Your Eyes, and what I thought was a guitar was a sampled trumpet.
Yeah.
So great. Let my mind explore. But when you're talking, you mentioned, body forward and dancing and stuff like that. So have you noticed anything from the live crowd at your shows? And have you noticed anything the crowd was doing to influence you to kind of make the music you're making or go into the direction that you're going?
It had nothing to do with the crowd, and honestly, it had to do with us just being bored of just kind of we when we played in Europe, you have to play a little bit longer because that's the expectation. And when we were doing that, we were just be like, oh wow, a lot of our songs just feel exactly the same kind of groove and tempo, and like, it's all just, and and then at the same time, we wanted the crowds, and the audiences in the future to feel more emboldened by the music to move your body and not be so weird and stuffy as a lot of rock shows tend to be with like indie pop or indie pop adjacent music or whatever. Obviously, like, younger bands with younger audiences, they're less self-conscious or insecure about moving their bodies. And we wanted to make music that made everyone feel not insecure about their bodies and wanting to move if the mood strikes them. And for us, it's just more exciting to be more rhythmically diverse in the record. We wanted the record to be way more rhythmically diverse opposed to the all our previous stuff, basically. So that was like the big goal, was to just the rhythmic diversity in sound. And then, and obviously the kind of droning elements are always something that's going to be present in our music. That's the repetition and droning is always going to be there, but how do you mix that up more?
Yes, and regarding like all the the stuffiness of rock shows and stuff like that. Even me going to the last Dummy show in New York City, and even with your old band, you had a lot of visuals going on
Yeah.
and projections, and it kind of added to it and made it was different. It was a different feeling. I
Yeah.
didn't really feel like I was at an ordinary show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like I was kind of transported in a way, which is great.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we want, the space to be ours for that time and like try to like, make time not feel real for those, 30 35 minutes. And hopefully the whole, night has been curated in a way that you feel like you're not at just some random show. It feels like a curated like event.
Yeah, and I bet that's what your release show is going to be, which is awesome. So with your relatively new creative direction and trying new things, do you feel that Dummy is at a point where listeners have an expectation as to what Dummy is going to sound like, or do you want to constantly change and alter that expectation?
I think for us, we want to be excited about what we're doing. We don't really, the audience isn't, the only way that an audience is considered is that it's pop music. We want it to be catchy and fun to listen to. That's really that's where our, consideration for the audiences begin and end. It's just we want it to be, it's pop music. We want it to be fun and accessible and like, emotionally resonant. And this record in particular, we felt like we allowed more emotional colors to kind of come in opposed to our older stuff that feels a little more distant in terms of like the emotionality. I think we allowed, the possibility of something maybe to be not corny, but like just, a little more nakedly emotional. I don't know if that actually happened, but in our minds, it did. Like this record feels more emotional, whatever that means, comparatively to our old stuff.
Yeah. Do you guys ever feel when you're making an album, I know this is probably more common with bigger acts with a lot more people tied to it. A lot of people, oh, I need a song for radio. I need a song for the club. I need a song for this. I need
Yeah.
a song for that. For you guys, for Dummy, do you just want to do what we've been talking about, just have a curated experience at a show and make people feel the way they want to feel and open expression or anything like that?
At a show for us, we just want it to feel like, every band that you're watching is an interesting, exciting, artist. And obviously that can't always happen. Sometimes bands aren't available, or sometimes you have to take into other considerations in terms of like, if you're in a smaller town, you might want to like, have some bands that, will help the draw and like maybe they're not necessarily your cup of tea or they're like they're close enough to your cup of tea that you're like fine with it. But in terms of it, yeah, we just want the show to be interesting for, the audience and for the people coming because they are spending their money and they're spending their time to come to our show. So we want it to be worth those things. And for us as a band, as a live performance band, like what you said with the visuals, we want to make, it feels like a lot of bands just get up there, play their songs with the lights bright as fuck, and then there's no vibe. And that's fine, whatever. Bands can do whatever they want. But for us, we want to make sure that, you know, it's different. There's more effort paid to like, not just like play a song, stop, thanks, play a song, stop, thanks. Like, we want it to flow as like one, the way you would listen to a record. We want the live experience to be the same. And that's how we've always approached live shows. But in terms of like the way we write songs and thinking about any external things like Spotify or whatever, like audience perception or like none of that is a consideration. We make music for ourselves because we're all older. We all do this because we love it and we feel compelled to make art. And it's not the smartest path if you want to live a healthy mental life. So, we want to do it for us, it's not really for anyone else. Obviously, when we put it out, it's for people to hear and it's for everyone at that point. But when we're making it, the consideration of other people outside of our own personal gratification doesn't exist.
When you're in this thing, this artistic machine that's not tied to lots of money and fame and all this other expectations, I'm sure the stresses and a lot of the added expenses or whatever that goes through being a touring band, all of that being said, and essentially losing money on the road, what levels you out and what keeps you calm during these situations?
Uh, I don't think I'm ever calm during these situations. I don't think any band at our level, you know, I guess like for us, like we tour because there's an audience for it. We don't just tour because, you know, let's go on tour for, obviously we love touring and we want to do it, but we try to do it smart and as financially responsible because we are older adults and we don't want to like eat shit. And the touring on our mandatory enjoyment, we ate shit quite a bit. From a van breaking down that cost us like $15,000 in the end, like in terms of expenses, and like COVID fucking up one of our tours. And it's just, it obviously everyone knows the touring model is kind of fucked in general in terms of like being a small band. And, we don't have any delusions that like our band will make a living off of this. We do it, we have enough to where the band sustains itself, basically. And when we go on tour, we're able to pay the bills that we need to pay while we're on tour. But beyond that, we're not making money. We're not pretending to make a living off of the band. And I think people think that we're doing okay, maybe money wise, but we're broke most of the time in terms of the band itself. So it's all coming from a place of like artistic passion, not any sort of social or monetary capital.
Right.
I think all the
And
bands we look up to, that's what they were doing. And they just,
yeah.
some of them happen to become bands that people cared about. But a lot of them are bands that, were not appreciated in their day and still are definitely underappreciated, even though the internet has made, certain, things more visible in terms of like the music that we care about. So, it's just, what you were mentioning, Water from Your Eyes. I feel like that's one of the few bands that I think for us, artistically speaking, we relate to in terms of like, they're just doing their own thing. They're not really necessarily connected to any particular scene or sound or whatever. Obviously, I think we have a little bit more of a connection to like indie pop for whatever reason. But beyond that, like we feel pretty disconnected from the music industry at large. The stuff we relate to is definitely smaller scale stuff.
If I would to recommend a band to anyone that I know is that likes a lot of the stuff you're mentioning, like the Kraftwerks of the world, or My Bloody Valentine, or whatever comparison. I'm gonna recommend Dummy, not
Yeah.
because they're gonna sound exactly like this, but if you would be into this, you might enjoy a little Dummy.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about small bands, right? And Dummy as a small band, you're also helping out smaller bands, but doing a lot of PR
Yeah.
for certain artists. Tell me about some of the most either what fulfills you about doing it and what kind of stresses you out about doing it, what annoys you about doing it.
Oh, well, with PR, I'm basically just using whatever amount of social capital that I've gained from my previous band and Dummy to just help bands that otherwise wouldn't have maybe access to the, writers or outlets or blogs. Just, someone will more likely open an email I'm sending than a cold email from a band they've never heard of. And I just want to use whatever social capital I have for Dummy to like help out other bands. And I charge a reasonable price because I understand the like financial aspect of being in a band. And so that aspect of it, it's just what gratifies me is when I am able to help out a band that, most people probably wouldn't have heard before because they're not on a label or they're on a small label. And, that feels good. The parts that frustrate is that PR, there's a million and one bands trying to get PR. And when bands get frustrated by the lack of, coverage, it doesn't necessarily have to do with them or their music being lacking. It, which of course some of it, the music's fine and like, if it connects, it connects. If it doesn't. It's incredibly impossible to predict. There's things that I'm like, oh, this is a home run, and then no one cares. And then there's things I'm like, I feel less certain about, and then it gets picked up a bunch, and I'm like, what? So it's hard, that aspect, the frustration from bands. While I understand the frustration, of course, because it's your music and you want people to hear it. It's just the reality is like, there's a kabillion bands trying to get, cut through all the noise. And all I can do is just send out emails and bug people up to the point of not being annoying. So it's really hard to PR is not an easy game, and it's really, the more and more websites shut down or, only take emails from, the bigger PR agencies or and have less curious ears, it's going to continue this way. And that's why I try to I'm more concerned with the smaller blogs and the smaller websites opposed to the bigger ones because, I want to make sure the groundwork is set so, when the bigger ones don't cover you, you still have that, good, yeah, groundwork of places that cover, more marginalized, smaller, unsigned bands.
Right. So when it comes to just overall, even with your PR work and Dummy, have you set any goals for yourself? It could be anything. It doesn't have to be monetary or anything. Any kind of things, aspects that you want to achieve with both endeavors.
The PR stuff, just, continue to help bands, hopefully shepherding some to labels and stuff like that. It's been really gratifying with the aluminum record that I helped get them signed to Felt and they're friends of mine, but they're also I think they made a great record and so that's really gratifying and I hope to do that more. In terms of Dummy, I don't have, you know, all the goals we ever had we achieved. And each now and everything else has been surprising and, you know, cherry on top. So, if we keep, if we get to make another record, if that makes sense, I just hope we make another compelling, good record that people, have fun listening to and not necessarily, I would love to go to Japan. I would love to go to Australia. I'd love to go to that, that sort of stuff would be cool. I'd love to play Iceland, but that's those would be my only goals would be to go to places I've never been before to for touring. That would be sick. But, you know, that's like a that's not artistic. Our goals are always first and foremost artistic goals. And then, trying to lift up other bands along the way.
Yeah, especially Aluminum and Mo Dottie wearing the shirt. That new Aluminum record, tremendous.
Yeah.
They're playing with some of the things that y'all been playing with, like sampling, like Behind My Mouth.
Yeah.
Outstanding stuff. Love
The
it.
song Call an Angel is really also very, very fucking good. And the
Yep.
new Dottie record that will be announced at some point is also very, very good. And
I'm excited.
it's their debut LP. So and they're putting it out themselves, which is sick.
Great. I love it. I can't wait to hear it and have them back to talk about it as well.
Those are
And of course, yeah,
my buds.
yeah, great people. Joe, thanks again for coming on the show. So, Joe, this is your time. Plug away whatever you need, and of course, whatever you shout, those links will be in the description of this episode. So, go ahead.
Oh, it's like Hot Ones at the end of Hot Ones where
Yeah,
this camera, this camera, this camera.
yeah.
I don't really have anything to plug. You should go listen to Transient Waves and you should also listen to the Sheaves new record. It's really good. And yeah, just look out for the Modati record. Look out for man, I didn't think about this beforehand, but
How
yeah,
selfless of you plugging other bands
I
during
don't
your
care.
time.
My I don't fuck me. I don't care about me. I just want other bands to, I don't know. Transient Waves is a really cool band from the 90s. Incredible band. Also shout out to Colin Newman, his record Bastard with his wife. Um Malka Spiegel, that shit rules. I don't know. Yeah, just recently been listening to a lot of Wendy and Carl, Azusa Plane, just a lot of Midwest droney stuff that's really sick. And I don't know. Yeah, just listen to that stuff. Let someone, listen to anything on Warlords or Jukebox or Mind Expansion. Just search out that stuff or Too Pure Records. Just always dig into Moonshake or Leica or any of those sort of bands. Just, just underheard bands that need more love. And Roy Montgomery. Shout out Roy Montgomery. Huge influence on the Dummy record with all his bands.
And you have a an inspiration playlist. Well, as well,
Yes.
which I'm
Yeah.
sure most of the stuff's going to be on there too.
It's almost, yeah, all of it's on there.
Yeah.
All that stuff except for transient waves.
Okay.
And there was another, whatever the other one, the Sheaves. Sheaves are just a really cool band from either, I can't remember if it's Arizona or New Mexico, but they rule. It's like jangly no wave, which is a weird thing and it's really, really good.
Okay. All right, Joe. Thank you so much again for coming on My Little Underground. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Always a pleasure to be here.
All right. And congrats on LP2 and the European tour and the West Coast tour and all that stuff.
Thanks.
My little underground.